American Legion Post 624 for inviting me to speak today, as it's an honor and privilege. My name is Master Sergeant Sean Tobias Ambrose, and I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. I've served in the Army for the past 15 years as a military police officer, medic, and designated squad marksman, while serving 2 years in Afghanistan's Kunar province from 2009 to 2010, 2011 to 2012. Before I get on to my story, I wanted to talk a little bit about the reason why we're here. Arguably one of the most iconic military decorations, the Purple Heart. Officially recognized as the first military decoration, General George Washington established the Purple Heart, then the Badge of Military Merit, 241 years ago today, and it's reserved as a badge of honor for those service members who are wounded and killed in action, and is a symbol to all Americans for those who sacrificed so much for our nation. The bronze heart-shaped award filled with purple, symbolizing royalty, highlighted the contributions of the individual soldier and was supposed to stand out when worn on the uniform. Many years later, General MacArthur, along with the United States heraldry, reestablished what we now know as the Purple Heart, and even awarded himself the first one with an engraved number 1 on the back because it was awarded for merit in military combat actions and not those who were killed and wounded at the time. It wasn't until President Roosevelt that they changed the award for only those who were killed since the start of the war, and retroactively awarded one to the first woman, Lieutenant Cox, trying to sustain a hospital open during Pearl Harbor. With the high casualty rates in the war in 1944, the medal was changed yet again to include those who were wounded. From President Kennedy to President Nixon, the medal still adapted to be awarded to those who were killed back in World War I, to the developing terrorism, and even a select few civilians who served in the armed forces. The fact that I'm standing here today, associated with some of the greatest men and women who have ever been bestowed this award, such as Curry Hayes, who was awarded 9 Purple Hearts in Vietnam, is unimaginable to myself. Days like today provides me time to stop and reflect on my time in service, those I've met along the way, and the events of the wars they unfolded for me. For me, when I think about any award that I may wear, I think about those before me who paved the asphalt of sacrifice through their endeavors so that when my time came to go to war, I could apply what I had learned to my scenario and be successful in combat. As many veterans carry heavy burdens of experience, I'm here to share 2 of my own with you today. As a young private in Afghanistan in 2009, I found myself on the prelude to the deadliest battle in the war, the Battle of Kamdesh, in which 300 to 400 Taliban fighters would eventually overrun Kop Keating. Those same enemy fighters were moving into position, used us as target practice for their assault 30 days prior. On the morning of September 10th, our squad was activated to help medevac others from a unit off a mountain who were cut off by a sniper. This would become my alive day. I watched as my team leaders all volunteered to go up the mountain and walk into the unknown, which gave me the courage to volunteer and go up as their medic. As we dodged sniper rounds for 200 meters where the cut-off Americans should have been, the broken radio communications from the Hindu Kush Mountains, which inclined high around us, cleared up, and we were notified that 200 was wrongly transmitted when it was actually 2,000 meters. With no water, no food, my leaders kept a stern face and tackled the next obstacle. Maneuvering around a sniper above us as well as enemy fighter and Osama bin Laden's safe house to our rear brought a slow and moving, tedious progress. Once parallel with the casualties, we can now see my lieutenant, Lieutenant Tyler Parton, 175 meters in the open, dead, and multiple others wounded, pinned down against rocks. Little did we know that it was not a singular sniper. The Taliban hired a Czechoslovakian sniper who had over 300 Americans killed or wounded under his belt since the start of the war. He traveled with 2 additional snipers covering his flanks, as well as 100 enemy fighters that maneuvered around us, hoping that our rescue team would now need a rescue team. With air support and heavy smoke missions, we were able to run towards the snipers, grabbing the wounded. I worked on an Afghan soldier who was shot in the leg, and an American that was shot twice through the kneecap and once in the mouth. After removing everyone from the area came the slow, dark progress of getting down the mountain we had never seen. Halfway down, an impatient Afghan used his flashlight, giving our position away. All of Saw village across the river opened fire on us. The interpreter collapsed on my body as he was shot in the shoulder, and another Afghan soldier fell above my feet, 2 bullets to his face. Things started to black out as I was reaching heat exhaustion, and right before I did, I heard my first sergeant yell into the radio, "Broken Arrow." Broken Arrow was an unofficial Vietnam term that meant for all air assets to come to a need of a unit on the verge of complete destruction. As I woke up to my body being pelted by brass falling from the sky, I looked above me to see what I could only describe as pure sacrifice. A pilot who saw that we were extremely pinned down brought his helicopter down to enemy gun level so that the enemy bullets could penetrate his aircraft and not us. C-130 Spectre gunships and Apache helicopters are coming in for as many strafing runs as they could. As I sat up to move down the mountain, I saw a big red ball coming from across the river, which was a Russian-made B-10 rocket. It slammed into the rock wall I was laying behind, peppering shrapnel all over the area and our bodies as my shoulder was dislocated. I had to have one of my team leaders use the buttstock of his rifle and slammed it into my shoulder 5 times to reset it and get me back on my feet. With the help of air support, we were able to extract everyone off the mountain that day. Everything I witnessed that day helped build the foundation of my leadership style, in which I would have to apply over a year later when I would have found my team completely cut off and surrounded. 8 months after coming home, I volunteered to go back to Afghanistan, in which I was the sergeant this time, leading 3 young soldiers into combat. As a major enemy force was pushing into country, our squad of military police were called to support Operation Diamond Head. The mission was simple: push into the valley, bring support to the remote villages, and put bad guys in body bags. On the morning of August 4th, 2011, our squad was called to help a cut-off humanitarian aid convoy who left their own Afghan police officers in a kill zone, wounded and bleeding out. Once on scene, we had a village to our right with a small waterway ditch where the Afghan police officer lay, bleeding. To the left was a cornfield right off the side of the road and 2 mountains on each side that looked down onto the battle. Not wanting to put myself in a position of disadvantage, I decided I could not let the Afghan police officer bleed out, as that's not what we do as Americans when another human being is in need. As I ran from my 3rd truck to the first under fire, I baseball slid into the ditch and laid next to the police officer who was slowly bleeding out. As I applied the tourniquet to his leg, he was digging with his bare hands and nails for more defilade and was squirming around to try and be one with the earth. To calm him down, I pulled him into my body and laid on my side so that if an enemy round penetrated the ditch, a stray round would come in and hit my body armor and I would take the hit instead of him. Being I was in a situation I did not want to be in, my squad leader, Sergeant Kaz, pulled up with his vehicle and extracted 2 hand grenades, which I took as my cue to get out of the ditch. As I got my casualty on his feet, an F-16 came 100 feet off the ground. I could see the pilot's red helmet. He was flying so low. He banked left, shot straight up, hitting his afterburners to create a show of force. Simultaneously, Sergeant Kaz lobbed both grenades on the other side of the truck into the cornfield. Not understanding why their grenades were detonating so close, as I put my casualty into the first truck, I looked in the cornfields, which were swaying back heavily as enemy fighters were running straight at us. My last vivid thought was that the enemies were going to try to overrun our position. The machine gun on truck 1 was down, and my friend, Sergeant Lane, stood on top of the 12-foot truck completely exposed with no armor, manually firing the machine gun against a danger close enemy. I grabbed my sniper rifle and got on top of the truck with him and fired precision shots into the village as he covered the cornfield. This went on for some time until I heard Lane yell in pain as a round skimmed his leg. Watching Kaz run to the fuel truck blocking the road, the 3 of us decided to move it into the ditch and empty the fuel so the Taliban couldn't capture its resources. Standing at the hood of the truck, enemy bullets were penetrating the fuel truck, which could have ignited at any minute. Our superiors told us to sustain our casualty and defend our position at all costs until the replacement unit had gotten there in 15 minutes. Sergeant Kaz, Sergeant Lane, and I decided to cover the weak points of truck 1, which still had a gun down. Lane and Kaz covered the front and the village while I covered the blind spots in the cornfield. I fired over 550 rounds as well as 25 grenades from my launcher, which ultimately disabled my own weapon. The driver of truck 1 gave me his M249 squad automatic weapon. As I rounded the back of truck 1, it was then I would experience the scariest moment of my life. In slow motion, 3 Taliban fighters exited the cornfield, no more than 8 feet from me. All 4 of us were shocked to see one another. Time stopped, but the battle raged on outside of our glass bubble. All 3 of the Taliban fighters, eyes open wide, yelled to one another and started to raise their weapons at me. Using my weapon as a paintbrush, their canvas, my canvas was their bodies. I aimed at the far right enemy fighter while holding down the trigger. I traced my muzzle of the weapon as the recoil lifted it from the right to the left. I retraced my weapon and saw the limp bodies roll off the side of the road. With our weapons being hot, I needed lube, which was in the back of my truck. As I ran back, I climbed through the back hatch to check on my soldiers, who all looked at me with a general concern like they wanted to break some bad news to me. My driver, Garcia, told me that air support can see enemy fighters moving around us. Apparently, we were completely surrounded. and the 16 of us Americans were cut off by an estimated 180 enemy fighters. As scary as it was, I merely found myself back on that mountain in September of 2009. I remember that stern look my leaders had. They took the situation for what it was, and they tackled the next obstacle. I applied what I had learned as a young soldier so that I could now lead my soldiers into combat. My soldiers who pleaded that they wanted to exit the vehicle and help us fight were met with my repeated denials. In my mind, it was my job to bring my soldiers back home alive. Their families trusted me to make the right decisions, and in my mind, I refused to put my soldiers in a body bag. My soldiers would put me in one. As the battle raged on, air support would conduct danger close strafing runs into the cornfield. My luck would soon run out as I tried to climb on the back of Truck 1 to provide cover. As I eliminated an enemy fighter in the village, something snapped my head back and to the right as a piece of shrapnel penetrated my face 1 inch below my left eye. My friend, Sergeant Lane, being completely concerned for me, pulled it out of my face, put a dip in his mouth, and told me to stop being a pansy. It was these stressful yet eventful times I will cherish the rest of my life. The fact that God has given me an opportunity to still be alive and tell these stories of these men is something I can never repay. To all the veterans here today, I sincerely thank you for your service and your sacrifice. Your excellence is unparalleled and your service is invaluable. Your sacrifices will never be forgotten. I share the pride you feel in being able to say that you've served in the greatest military in the world. For those who wear this award proudly, thank you. Thank you for your sacrifice and putting your mind and body in front of the millions of Americans you swore to defend. Thank you for allowing me to tell my story today. May God bless our veterans. May God bless those serving in harm's way. And may God continue to bless the United States of America.